America's union movement is now entering a stage of desperation. Their cover is slipping away, exposing a nucleus of lies and control. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like and subscribe to the new Frontline podcast and follow Freedom Foundation to stay up to date on all of our episodes. Keep watching. If there's anything we know to be true about a dying movement, it's that during their fall from grace, they will try and bring as many people down with them. And by all accounts, there are some movements in America that are getting very, very desperate. A recent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal by opinion contributor Kimberly Strassel talks specifically about why it is that unions are getting desperate, who they are bringing down with them, and why you, the average consumer, should pay attention to this change, even if you don't normally pay attention to what unions are doing. She writes in her op-ed that a huge instigator of this change is the school choice movement. Now, before anyone runs to the comment section to say their piece about school choice, please note that we are not here to debate the policy itself. We're examining how unions are responding to it and what that tells us about their declining influence. Two facts to note about this. Firstly, a surge in school choice will negatively affect unions and their work. That's just a baseline given. Secondly, given the educational hole that's happening in America that we're trying to desperately dig ourselves out of, school choice is proving to be a beloved and popular option. For example, here in Texas, it took maybe mere days for 100,000 students to opt into the program after it was introduced. So it's popular, and its popularity really isn't going anywhere. Kimberly Strassel, the op-ed author, notes this, and she writes, "Only 4 Democratic governors have officially refused to take part in the federal program in Hawaii, New Mexico, Oregon, and Wisconsin, a number that the National Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers view in outright panic, especially as unions made opt-out a litmus test of good Democratic governance. It's one thing for purple state governors to remain on the fence, but when even California, New York, and Illinois are debating whether to give their parents access to choice dollars in a nod to the danger of giving the GOP a wedge issue, the unions have a big problem. Hence their increasing and increasingly nasty use of lawfare, attempting to impose via judicial decree what they can't win from voter sentiment or whip politics." Strassel, as you can see, highlights the intense political lawfare that unions are waging in different states over this particular issue, and that contributes to the decline in both popularity and membership that unions are now seeing. The biggest takeaway here is that some folks are just downright nasty about this. It's one thing to want to have a conversation about what's better or worse for education, but union members who have been blindly mobilized to protest or riot are not interested in talking. They're interested in shouting from the rooftops that this is effed up. They're calling it an attack on democracy and attacking specific Democrats and politicians who have historically sided with them, and now that they don't, they become the object of the union's wrath. You cannot bite the hand that feeds you, because at some point, even a morally dubious politician will get sick of giving you what you demand and then you spitting in their face as a response. Kimberly Strassel also touches on this in the last paragraph of her op-ed that I wanted to highlight. Democrats will have to decide how much longer to stick with this unraveling cartel. School choice is out of the bottle, experiencing exponential growth. Union demands that Democrats actively stand to thwart this public tide have already become politically untenable. Their rearguard actions are further stoking public discontent. It's past time for Democrats to innovate on the education front, and that's going to require a new relationship with an outdated and rusty union machine. And when we look at greater trends like these, it really does not surprise me that longtime labor union leaders such as Becky Pringle of the NEA or Saunders of AFSCME are now in the last few months of their time in the president's seat. Becky Pringle has been at the helm of the NEA since 2020, so about 6 years, and Saunders has spent an insane 14 years in union leadership. I mean this, I'm not even being facetious. I can't even imagine being, as a career, that angry and pissed off and loud for 14 years. I was liberal in college for 3 years, and it was exhausting. But as these two people conclude their leadership, in the news, you are going to hear a lot about supposedly what they've done for their unions and for the union movement, particularly with Lee. He was at the top during the landmark Janus v. AFSCME case, and so a lot of his messaging will include statements like this one. At a make-or-break moment, President Saunders modernized and revitalized AFSCME, positioning the union to withstand existential threats, including the Supreme Court's decision in Janus v. AFSCME Council 31, a ruling designed to rig the rules so workers would have fewer resources and less power. The real goal was to silence working people by undermining their ability to stand together. But President Saunders responded by expanding organizing and deepening member engagement across the union. In this realm of work, you will hear that particular phrase, the real goal, so many times. People will try and tell you that they know the real truth, and then they will posit themselves as the only person who is able to tell you the real truth. Something to note is that's kind of how cults and highly intense, social situations indoctrinate people. That's how they get you to believe what they're saying, by positing themselves as the only person, the only group that knows the real truth and knows what's really going on. It's interesting that unions use the same messaging. That's all I'm going to say. Janus v. AFSCME had nothing to do with fewer resources and less power, but everything to do with that ever-important ability, the ability to choose. Why else would SCOTUS have passed it? I also think an hilarious point in all of this is that in that quote I just read you, they called the Supreme Court's decision of Janus v. AFSCME an existential threat to their organization. What does it say when a ruling that is designed to back a worker's choice to join a union or not, what does it say when that basic right of choice becomes a threat to a union's existence? It does not look good, Lee, let me tell you that. And it really gets me that as a left-leaning organization, AFSCME would back choice-based topics like abortion, but when it's a choice-based topic that directly affects them, suddenly they're no longer pro-choice and they want to make union membership mandatory. Make it make sense. And it's the same issue with Becky Pringle as she comes to an end at the NEA. Her union takes a similar stance in heralding her as a DEI martyr, writing stuff like, Becky understands that public education is the foundation of an inclusive democracy, economy, and society. She consistently stands against every elected leader and decision maker who uses misinformation and attacks against students and educators as tools with which to dismantle and privatize public education and hold on to political power. This is describing Rebecca Pringle to a T. She is someone who is using misinformation and lies to manage education and maintain her own political influence. How else do you describe the NEA spending member money on donating to PACs and backing politicians? Because Becky Pringle knows that if she can back a politician to help get them into office, then they will in turn support her whenever she needs to advance her union's next agenda point. This screams hypocrisy, and yet am I really surprised? No, not in the slightest. This ties right into the next article I wanted to highlight, which is an op-ed by well-known school choice and education advocate Corey DeAngelis. DeAngelis' op-ed specifically talks about the ramifications of ICE protests in Minnesota, other No Kings protests last year, and ICE protests that happened in California also in last year. And it rightfully arrives at the conclusion that teachers' unions are using these cultural crises to hijack the education system to further their agenda in a whole new way. My favorite excerpt is a really meaty part of the argument, which I'll share with you right now. Ironically, one of the original arguments for public schools was to foster a cohesive society, uniting diverse Americans under shared values. But the teachers' union cartel has hijacked the system and flipped it on its head. They're using taxpayer-funded classrooms to indoctrinate kids with their political pet projects. The radical left realize that they don't need to have kids of their own to shape the nation's future. They can infiltrate government schools and mold millions of other people's children into their socialist worldview. It sounds very harsh, no doubt about it, but his assessment is entirely correct. They are now behaving like proper mobsters, resorting to violence and social control and remolding education to fit their agenda to change what the children of America are believing and learning in schools. DeAngelis also highlights proof of this exact thing, too, when Becky Pringle was part of an organization called the Sunrise Movement's event session, and it was an event called The Road to Political Revolution, where she is on video saying that she will use everything at her union's disposal to directly affect the next election and implying that they will use some kind of shady tactics to do so. If you haven't seen the videos, Moms for Liberty circled a bunch that have kind of gone viral since. Along with that, the NEA's Teacher of the Year is also on record saying that her job is deeply political and always has been. At this point now, it's all politics, and it should never have gotten that way. Time to defund the teachers' unions and expose their agenda for exactly what it is, a curriculum of control. Thanks for watching the new Frontline podcast. Hit that subscribe or follow button to stay up to date on every episode we post, and drop a comment down below. Do you agree, or is there something we missed?